Water and Civilization, a presentation by Dr. Daniel Johnson, Coastline Community College. In this lesson, we will explore the connection between a fundamental natural resource, water, and the development of human societies over time. Here are some key questions to think about. How have natural waterscapes shaped the development of human societies over time? How have human societies reshaped natural waterscapes? What are the consequences of our interactions with water? Even in prehistoric times, human societies clustered around sources of fresh water. This was necessary not only for drinking, but also because the plant and animal life necessary for survival was always richest there. As human societies evolved from hunter-gatherer economies to settled agrarian economies, this connection became even closer. Proximity to water was critical to ensure steady agricultural output and to provide a surplus, which encouraged more sophisticated economic activity, such as manufacturing and trade. Given these facts, it's not surprising that many of the earliest human civilizations were closely associated with major freshwater systems. This map illustrates this connection. In the Middle East, in the region between the Tigris and the Euphrates, we see the Fertile Crescent. The overflow of these rivers spread fertile soil on a broad floodplain, and the world's earliest experiments in systematic agriculture occurred here approximately 10,000 years ago. By 3000 BC, we see the development of some of the world's first city-states, developed in part because of the need to organize large numbers of people for major irrigation and flood control projects. These efforts to tame nature, however, had mixed results. The erratic and often wild flooding of the rivers brought prosperity, but it could also bring destruction. These problems were compounded by a limited understanding of how natural water systems operate. Over-irrigation, coupled with poor drainage systems, caused broad stretches of farmland to become overly saline and unproductive. Scholars have linked these ecological problems to the relatively short lifespans enjoyed by these early city-states. Over time, the centers of growth shifted as it became necessary to find new and more fertile lands. Further to the east, we see another sophisticated society arise in the Indus Valley, named after the key river that runs through this region. This area lies largely in modern-day Pakistan, which still derives much of its water from the Indus. By 2000 BC, the Indus Valley could boast major city-states such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. Yet, as with the Fertile Crescent, the waterscape of the Indus Valley could prove to be treacherous. Some scholars believe, for instance, that the decline of these early societies can be traced in part to geological events which shifted the course of the region's river systems and led to drought conditions. In China, we see similar developments in association with the Huanghe River, as well as to a lesser extent along the Yangtze. The fertility associated with the Huanghe stems from the light, fertile, loess soil that washes down into the river along its upper and middle reaches. The high concentration of silt in the river gives it a murky color, from which it derives its name in English, the Yellow River. At the lower end of the Huanghe, closer to the coast, this soil spreads out in a rich floodplain, creating ideal conditions for agriculture. In China, the natural bounty of the Huanghe is sometimes commemorated by referring to it as the Mother River, but it is also called the Sorrow of China. The same erratic flooding that spreads loess soil can also bring devastation, particularly as the concentration of human population in the region grew. For thousands of years, the Chinese have struggled to contain and control the river through levees and other type of government-directed engineering projects. Yet these efforts were never entirely successful. It's estimated that since their inception, the levees along the Huanghe have been breached over 1,500 times, often with catastrophic results. The fabled Egyptian civilization of northern Africa provides yet another example of the close association between a major river system and the increasing sophistication of human political and economic organization. In this case, the key river proved to be more benevolent. The rising of the Nile spreads rich sediment and moisture along a broad floodplain, as we see elsewhere, but these floods are comparatively gentle. This contributed to the creation of a more reliable economy, and a more durable form of political organization. Unlike the city-states of the Fertile Crescent, this region enjoyed relatively stable governments which stretched out over thousands of years. Scholars have also suggested that the predictable bounty of the Nile was reflected in the general optimism of Egyptian religious beliefs, compared to the rather gloomy and fearful beliefs found in Mesopotamia. We find our final example in the Americas. The Great Valley of Mexico was not defined by a particular river, but it was crowded with large shallow lakes and marshlands. By the 13th century A.D., the Aztecs had begun to create the empire which would dominate Central America until the arrival of the Europeans. Their capital city, Tenochtitlan, arose on an island in the great lake Texcoco. Rich agricultural lands, which sustained the largest population concentrations in the Americas, were carved out of the marshlands through a system of chinapas, artificial islands that were patiently built up over time. As elsewhere, the need to coordinate water projects helped stimulate the growth of sophisticated government organization. Ultimately, the resources provided by these clever agricultural techniques proved insufficient to feed the region's rapidly growing population, contributing to the Aztecs' aggressive conquest of surrounding areas, which provided the tribute necessary to sustain their society. Access to water was critical for early civilizations because it made large-scale agriculture possible. But water was important for other reasons as well. Water systems were often the key to providing transportation and communication systems for increasingly large and sophisticated societies. Moving large quantities of goods or communicating over long distances on land was slow and cumbersome. Boats and ships could perform this task much more efficiently. Thus, waterborne transportation helped provide the trade and communication networks that bound these societies together. It also made possible the growth of large urban areas, which served as economic, political, and cultural hubs. If you look at the location of many major world cities, both in the past and the present, you'll note that they most frequently occur at what geographers refer to as a natural transportation break. Typically, these natural transportation centers lie along major lakes and rivers and along coastal areas that have natural harbors. Consider Rome, which sprang up along the banks of the Tiber River, or in more modern times, places like London and Paris, which are located close to where major rivers flow into the ocean. Clustering large numbers of people together in a single location requires not only a ready supply of drinking water, but also a way of getting rid of the human waste generated by this concentrated population. Quite early in human history, urban dwellers began to experiment with more sophisticated systems to provide sanitation and safer drinking water. In the Indus Valley, for instance, we see the development of some impressive sewer systems, including what might be called the very earliest flush toilets. Early urban water systems reached their pinnacle in Rome, which created complex networks of artificial aqueducts. Sadly, in the ages that followed, much of this engineering sophistication was lost or ignored, leading to horrific conditions in large cities. Without clean water or adequate sewers, major cities were regularly swept by epidemic disease and characterized by unpleasant living conditions.